Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I did explain this in the previous video, but I'm going to do so again just in case I post these videos out of order, because what I am trying to do now when I record is I'm trying to record multiple shorter videos at one time and then editing and releasing them as I feel up to doing so. So I might have mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm going to do so again now because I don't know in what order the videos will be posted. You might notice a slight lisp or difference in my speech because since I last recorded, I now have a clear, although you might see a little bit of shining, I have a clear brace for my TMJ to try to keep as much as possible everything in the right position. So it is affecting how I speak a bit. And if you notice that, that's why. And it also makes me more dry, so I might be taking more sips of water. Or tea in this case. I do have water as well, for when the tea runs out. So, the last video I recorded, whether or not I have already posted it, was one covering kind of a hodgepodge of different books. This particular video will be more focused. This particular video will be going through the Q4 books, my TBR and my current reads for this quarter. So I will start off, I think, with the ones I'm currently reading and then go on to the ones that I plan on reading and the couple ones that I did pick up, whether or not I plan on reading them this quarter. So one of them, I'm just going to flip the Kindle at you because, I mean, I don't think the cover will show up very well. This is the A to Z of Victorian crime. Oh, it did let me show the cover briefly. Yay. It's really just a list of, think of a who's who kind of thing. It's not my preferred style. I probably wouldn't necessarily read it again. I am enjoying it well enough. It's a nice read if I just need something really quick, if I want to get a little section in. But it isn't particularly riveting. It's not narratively tied together. Like, it is definitely A is first, you know, this person A, then, you know, next person or next event, okay, now we're covering assassins, or, you know, whatever. It's very much who's who in alphabetical order. And yeah, it's just, it feels like a reference book to a certain extent. So there's that. Now, what I finished, oh, that's what I wanted to show. I haven't put this one in the book journal yet. That was the other one I didn't show you the library card and the catalog card for. I finished Murder by the Book. This was a very quick and enjoyable read. I started this for Victober in particular, and the concept behind this was the idea that some of the, they would call them, hold on, what would they call them? Well, it's books like Jack Shepherd, and they were considered I think it's called Newsbury books. Newsbury, Newsgate? I think it was Newsgate. The Newsgate books, I believe what it's actually called, where they were very much focused on criminality, almost glorifying it. Jack Shepherd definitely did that particular book. I mean, even I am familiar with the story of Jack Shepherd, not through the novelization that this particular author had done, not this author, but the author who wrote Jack Shepherd back in the day. I wasn't familiar with his work, but I was familiar with the story of Jack Shepherd. Although I'm not sure how much of that story now is based off of the mythos that the author created for Jack Shepherd. But the point of it is how murders and crime, but particularly the murder at the center of this book, was being blamed on these Newsgate novels, but in particular Jack Shepherd. The murderer going so far as to claim that he blamed the book and the play, Jack Shepherd, for his actions. Kind of think of like the uproar about video games, or I think even comic books received a similar rap at a certain point. But this is Victorian era. So people like Dickens would catch some flack about that for Oliver. So it's a very interesting read. I actually really enjoyed the bits I learned about Dickens in this as well. So I would recommend this. There isn't my only... Oh, I didn't see it. Okay, I didn't see my only beef is that there are no footnotes, but there are footnotes. I just didn't notice them in the back. This is not my preferred form of doing footnotes, and I've had a couple books where they do this, where you don't know in the text that there are footnotes because they don't number it. You actually have to go back and keep track of page numbers to see if your page has any footnotes. And I've run into a couple books that have done that. First one I noticed that did that was Venerable Bede. The other one was, I want to say, Word Hoard. So it's not my preferred way of doing it. I'd rather each area where there's a footnote would have a number in the text, and then I would go back to that number, because at least I know there's a footnote for that specific section, instead of having to keep in mind, oh yeah, I want to keep an eye out for if there's a footnote that I want to look for this page, because I do actually read the footnotes, although I am aware that a lot of people do not. But yeah, I do recommend this book. It's a very easy read. I actually have either picked up or have on my wish list a couple of her other books, because here's her other titles, and this is what interested me. So she has Fanny Burney, a biography, and I believe, I forget which, did she do, I know she's an author, I can't pull her books out of my head. She was one of those, she write Gothic? She's around that period of time, like with Jane Austen, so not quite Gothic, but those very romantic type novels. I feel like I read one of hers. I can't remember which one of hers I read. I did read one of them, because it was almost over the top how innocent her main character was. And you'll probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The main character, she had one parent, I want to say it was her mother, who was French, and they ended up coming back to England. She'd been raised instead by like this curator, pastor or something, who had raised her, and you know, all the adventures and misadventures she runs into when she goes into London, I think it is London, for the first time, in the company of these people who are actually have morals that are more lax than the ones that she has been raised with. And I wish I could remember the title of the book, but I'm pretty sure it's a Fanny Burney book. So this is a biography of hers that they have here. They also have Myself and Other Fellows, A Life of Robert Louis Stevenson. Now these last two are the ones that particularly interested me. Jane's Fame, How Jane Austen Conquered the World, and the other one is Charlotte Bronte, A Fiery Heart. So those last two and the Fanny Burney one are the ones I definitely intend to read. Perhaps Robert Louis Stevenson. I think it's Louis. I don't read him a lot, so yeah, I was right. Okay, so recommend this book. Very quick read. Oops. I've been kind of monogamous in my reading, but I do, even though I have multiple ones going, I tend to be focusing on one book in particular right now. And this is The Butchering Art. I know I mentioned it in the Historathon Discord. I haven't been there in a little bit, just because of fatigue and then needing to finish the donut animals in time for my grandma's birthday party. But anyway, this is The Butchering Art, and it's Joseph, I think it's pronounced Lister maybe? Joseph, I'm going to say Leister because that's all I have always thought it was saying, even though I think Listerine is named after him. Anyway, The Butchering Art, Joseph Leister's quest to transform the grisly world of Victorian medicine. And this is by Lindsay Fitzharris. I had listened to, it feels like eons ago, though it's probably not that long ago, maybe a few years. I listened to a Great Courses class, or I guess it was Great Courses course. It's on the history of medicine through biography. And I found the section where they're talking about Joseph Leicester to be very interesting. Just everything he had to go through to get people to understand the importance of just washing your hands and being clean. It fascinated me, and I've always kind of wanted to know more about him. And once I realized, and I had been interested in the title anyway, I knew it was about the history of medicine when I saw this book, but once I fully realized it was about Joseph Leicester, I knew I had to get it. I knew I had to read it. So that's what I'm currently doing. And I have my taco magnet bookmark from Millie's Paper Co. in here, so make of that what you will. And I'm still very early on where he's still very much a medical student, and they're discussing about the dangers of being who's actually a student to be a surgeon, and specifically because there was a line drawn between physicians and surgeons. Surgeons kind of being considered a lower level because they were more hands-on than physicians who might not ever really touch a patient at that time period. So he was studying to be a surgeon. And this book right now is covering the different aspects of the medical student's life, from everything from the debauchery and wildness that you could see from the young men who were there to the black humor to the point where it was actually could be obscene. Now, black humor does come part and parcel with certain areas of work. I did work in healthcare. I worked as a nurse for 10 years. And that doesn't count my time period as a CNA before that when I was in high school. So I was in healthcare my entire career before I was forced to stop working because of health concerns. But dark humor was definitely very much a part of coping, particularly when you're dealing with high stress situations. But this was beyond normal black humor. It was quite, sorry, that was a weird pronunciation. That's the TMJ brace. My jaw's getting a little tired too. Anyway. This goes beyond normal dark humor. I think they described it as jet black humor and indifference toward the dead that pervaded this dissection room. Because it got to a point where they distance the humanness. And to a certain extent, yes, you do have to distance yourself. Not from the humanity, but when you can't be so... You have to be connected enough to the people you're dealing with that you're able to be empathetic and be able to care. But you also have to be able to go from one situation to the next. Like, you have to be able to have a patient who just died in one room and answer the call bell in the next room and not have that other person know that you had a patient that died, because this other person, the other patient, that's not an extra burden that they need to have. So it's your job to be able to compartmentalize, excuse me. It's hard to get some words out with this brace. And you also need to be able to do that in order to not get completely burned out from giving emotionally too much. So much that you aren't able to function. So to a certain extent, them being able to distance could be a good thing, but they went beyond the good thing. Just like with their dark humor, it went beyond dark humor. It went to that jet black area where it's like, okay, that's much. But the other thing they cover is the fact that since they did not wash their hands, since they did not adhere to what we consider just to be normal measures of just cleanliness, they did not keep that because there was no concept of germ theory. The idea of a microscope being used to diagnose or to discover a cause, a pathology for a particular disease, that was considered to be crazy. It was being seen in Paris But in London, it was considered almost laughable, like, oh, you carry this microscope, that's cute, but that's not where the future medicine's at. The microscope hasn't come that far. Whereas Leicester, who grew up with a father who had done a lot to advance the technology of the microscope, Leicester had grown up around the microscope. He was very familiar with how to use it, much more than a lot of his professors were, which is why I think we'll find out that he was uniquely set up to be the guy to be like, hey, we need to have practices in place to be more clean, to be, I can't bring the word out of my head right now, but to have a level of cleanliness that will keep germs away, and keep people alive. And as I recall from the video I watched, or from the Great Courses class, I believe I actually listened to it. From what I recall from the lesson on him was that he ended up starting first in the maternity wards for the poor, like the ones who were poor, and that you started seeing more women surviving because of his practices. Because a lot of women, and you saw this, I mean, you look at it in Tudor time, that's why people like Jane Seymour died, because they developed an infection after childbirth because they just didn't know what to do to possibly keep that from happening. There was no concept of germ theory. And Leicester did a lot to revolutionize how medicine was looked at. We owe this man a lot, and I really look forward to learning more. Okay, this is my precious. I got this on a deal. I'm not sure if I mentioned in a different video. I don't feel like I did. Or it's been a while. Queen Victoria's Mr. Brown. This is my precious. I got this for a steal. I've been watching it for a while because it's hard to get. I wonder if it's partially because there's a little bit of a desire to bury the Mr. Brown story by the royals, because I remember I was reading a book about Queen Victoria where the royals tried to block the author from printing too much about Mr. Brown, but the author pushed back and said, like, look, you only have control of what I got from your archives, not what I got from other sources. So she put in what she had discovered about Mr. Brown. So Mr. Brown, life story of the most remarkable royal servant in British history. And he was a Scotsman. Here is a picture of him. It's still blurry for whatever reason. But this book is old. And I think it looks like it only had the one printing as far as I can tell. So this is a 1938 book. So I've barely started. It has the nice uneven pages. And I am only on chapter 2. Look at my nice bookmark. My nice magnetic bookmark. Isn't it pretty? So yes, this will get more reading, and once I get started, it'll go fine. It's just that I can't bring myself to read it if there's any chance I can get anything on the pages, because this is a book that I can't necessarily get again. So this book is very precious to me. And then for the last one that I'm reading, this was kind of a last minute, like, oh, I think I'll start reading this for Victober. Not reading the whole book at one time, no, this is huge. This has multiple Charles Dickens books in it. The only one I've read, well, I've read 2 of these in adult form. Because I read all the illustrated classics as a kid, of like Oliver Twist, Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Christmas Carol, all of those. But I've only read 2 of them as an adult in an adult form. I read A Tale of Two Cities when I was in high school. That was the first time I really was riveted by Dickens as someone who is not a child anymore. And then I read Christmas Carol, I want to say, not last year for Christmas, but the year before that. But this will be my first time reading Oliver Twist as an adult. And I I'm on chapter 3. The text for this is ridiculously small. It's been a little while since I've sat down and read this, but I do need to get to it again. I am mostly familiar with Oliver Twist's story from the musical. I want to say it's a 70s, 80s musical. It has, you know, all the classics. Where is Love? It has Who Will Buy This Wonderful Morning? So things like that. Very classic musical. That is where I first fell in love with Oliver, but I didn't realize as a child what a dark story Oliver actually is. And my interest became piqued again when Oliver in particular got mentioned in Murder by the Book. So I've been intending to read Oliver anyway, so I picked Oliver up. And it's very much a style of the time. This is early Dickens. And I haven't yet had a chance to meet even the Dodger yet. So, I think I actually have several chapters before I reach Dodger. So, not very long, not very far at all, but I'm taking my time with it. I'm not worried about finishing it before Victober. I just wanted to get started. It was more of a whim that I started it anyway. Okay, so next is, before I go on to TBR, I just want to show a couple of the books I picked up that are kind of that era. This one is a little bit later. It covers, let's see, what does it say it covers? Okay, so this is called Book Row, an anecdotal and pictorial history of the antiquarian book trade. And it says in the back that they occupied a comparatively small area of New York City, that collection of phenomenal booksellers who began to ply their trade from the 1890s to the 1920s and beyond, on and around 4th Avenue south of 14th Street in sight of the aspiring Grace Church. Yet they left an indelible mark in the lives of book lovers fortunate enough to have visited them. Book Row had its own special aroma, the incomparable and unforgettable scent of books and dust, paper and ink, type and binding, the dazzling anticipation and excitement of seekers after books. So this should be an interesting read. It's a later era than Victorian, but I am still definitely going to enjoy that. This is the one that I unfortunately think I will not have time to finish during Victober, but I might still start it for quarter 3 because I have something of a fascination with Prince Albert. The whole reason why I started diving into Victorian books in the first place a couple years back, maybe it was only a year back, no, I think it was a couple years, was because I watched a documentary on Curiosity Stream. It actually made me quit my Curiosity Stream subscription, where I watched a documentary. It was very anti-Prince Albert to a point where it felt biased to the point of unreasonability. It was almost like they were projecting what they wanted to see on him. So I could not finish the documentary. It's like, I'm going to find my own things to read and read from Victoria's own letters what she thought, instead of your twisting of her letters to make it seem like what you want it to seem that he was. I've come to actually just trust documentaries because they oftentimes seem like they have their own thing they're trying to push, their own ideas, and they're trying to make you see things the way they want you to see them instead of just presenting facts and letting you make up your own mind. So I'm very leery of documentaries now. I will admit I am more inclined to watch true crime, but a lot of times I have watched multiple people covering the same case before, so it's very similar to reading multiple books on the same topic, just listening to multiple true crime people. But this book is called Uncrowned King, The Life of Prince Albert, and I'm pretty sure I was unable to get this on Kindle form. So, yeah, I mean, I can already tell by the title this is very pro Prince Albert, but I have already read about, oh, have I read We Too yet? Yes, I think I did. I think We Too was the first book that I read with Prince Albert in it. It was a dual biography, Prince Albert, sorry, the brace, Prince Albert and Queen Victoria, and then I had read a book that was just called Victoria. Yeah, this is a book that I'm looking forward to. I do believe I had picked up a Kindle book as well that was just had, you know, a less definitely pro Prince Albert title, but not necessarily against him. I want to get a view of him. I find him to be interesting. He seems to put a lot of effort into England in spite of always being seen as a foreigner. And I mean, he definitely had his ideas in mind in regards to England and Germany and those kind of things, but the efforts he put into different policies, as I recall, for England, even the fact that he did his best to try to diffuse the situation of England possibly getting involved in the American Civil War. That was like one of the last things he did before he died. He penned off some sort of letter to kind of like ease things so there wasn't another war England got involved in that had to do with America. So I thought that was interesting. That was right before his death. So I do look forward to reading this. I know that there were certain ministers who really appreciated Albert's efforts and appreciate that they can reach him maybe in the way they weren't able to reach Victoria. But yeah, look forward to reading this. Even if I don't necessarily get it this quarter, I would like to, but we'll see. And finally, the TBR of things I already have, they'll be started after Victober. And these may or may not get in this year. Mouse definitely will. And I've heard a lot of good things. This will be covered. This is a mixture of Historathon and comics. And this is considered, it's filed under memoir history. This is a guy's memoir / biography for his, I think it was his grandfather, maybe it was his father, who was a prisoner of war. Hang on, it says here. The story of Vladek Spiegelman, I probably mangled that, a Jewish survivor of Hitler's Europe, and his son, a cartoonist coming to terms with his father's story. Mouse approaches the unspeakable through the diminutive. Its form, the cartoon, the Nazis are cats, the Jews mice, shocks us out of any lingering sense of familiarity and succeeds in drawing us closer to the bleak heart of the Holocaust. Mouse is a haunting tale within a tale. Vladek's harrowing story of survival is woven into the author's account of his tortured relationship with his aging father. Against the backdrop of guilt brought by survival, they stage a normal life of small arguments and unhappy visits. This astonishing retelling of our century's grisliest news is a story of survival, not only of Vladek, but of the children who survive, even the survivors. Mouse studies the bloody paw prints of history and tracks its meaning for all of us. So this is one of my big goals to do this quarter. As soon as Victober is done, I will start Mouse, which might be the big cornerstone of when I do have a comic section. It'll be mostly Mouse and maybe another comic here and there. If I don't have any other comics to show, Mouse will be incorporated in the main Historathon fair. Next, on the TBR, I plan on reading this with my mom. I have to make sure she has this version. This is Scarlet and the Black, the true story of Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, hero of the Vatican Underground. And this is the book upon which the movie of the same name, The Scarlet and the Black, is based on. It's a movie with Gregory Peck playing Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, and with, why am I forgetting his name all of a sudden? The guy who plays the captain in the Sound of Music. His name will probably come after I turn off the camera. But Yeah, so two very, big name actors playing this movie. But it's based off of this very real story, which I have not actually read yet, so I'm looking forward to it. I do hope to read, maybe not this quarter, but there were a couple books that I had read in high school when I was writing a report on the Pope of the era, who got a lot of flack because he couldn't always be as overt in his helping as he'd like to be. There's a book that I can't find in physical form anymore. I must have borrowed it from the library or stupidly gotten rid of it or something. But I picked up the Kindle version, and it is called, I believe it's called The Myth of Hitler's Pope. And it is written by a rabbi who talks about all the things that the Pope did for the Jewish people during that period. So I want to reread that during a period of time where I'm not writing a report on that topic. So that may or may not be done this quarter, but The Scarlet and the Black will be. This was a book that was recommended to me by Janelle, who was too fond of books. She passed earlier this year. But this was a book that she recommended to me. It's called The Scalpel of Scotland Yard. And it's about one of the, I guess you could call him one of the fathers of forensic science. So I look forward to reading it. It's Scalpel Scotland Yard, The Life of Sir Bernard Spilsbury. And I'll be thinking of Janelle when I read this. Now this one, I definitely want to try to read this quarter. The Stasi Poetry Circle, the creative writing class that tried to win the Cold War. So they were trying to, just like anytime you want to reach someone, to sort of infiltrate someone's mind with a message, where do you go? You go to media, you go to music, you go to movies, you go to the storytelling, where the message can sort of be subtly seated within. And this is what the Stasi Poetry Circle was intended for, to hit people where they might not expect it. It says, in 1982, East Germany's fearsome secret police, convinced that writers were embedding subversive messages in their work, decided to train their own writers, weaponizing poetry in the struggle against the class enemy. The Stasi Poetry Circle reveals how a group of soldiers and border guards gathered for monthly meetings at a heavily guarded military compound in socialist East Berlin to learn how to write lyrical verse. So I just look forward to reading this. It looks like it'll be a fairly short read. Then I have The Forager Spell, and I mentioned this before. This is about the forager who copied, I think it was Rembrandt's. I'm sorry, Vermeer's, I think it was actually. Yeah, it was Vermeer's. So, of course, the girl with pearl earring. So, yeah, this is a forager who was known for forging particularly Vermeer's. And it wasn't necessarily that he was the best artist, it says in the introduction. It's that he knew how to sell. And he was selling these forgeries even to mark as high as Hermann Göring, one of the most reviled leaders of the Nazi Germany, and a fanatic collector of art. And it goes on to say it was an almost perfect crime. For 7 years, a no-account painter named Hans von Meeringen managed to pass off his paintings as those of one of the most beloved and admired artists who ever lived, Vermeer. But the reason for the forger's success was not his artistic skill. Van Meeringen was a mediocre artist. His true genius lay in psychological manipulation, and he came within inches of fooling both the Nazis and the world. Instead, he landed in an Amsterdam court on trial for his life. So I look forward to reading this, whether I get it in this quarter or not. I'd like to get this in this quarter because this was a gift from somebody and I haven't read it yet. This is The Radium Girls. Again, another story I heard about from either Great Courses or from a podcast. And this is a rough story. It's it's an important case that led to life-changing regulation to protect workers. But a lot of girls had their lives ruined in order to get these life-changing legislation passed. So it's a very sad but very important story. Looks like it's water from here onward. This one I am definitely reading this year. I'm going to be starting this around the Christie's Missing Readathon. And that's the first, I think it's like first 14 days of December, during the period of time where she was missing. This is a book, a biography, official biography that was approved by Agatha Christie's daughter. So I've been holding off reading this. I do plan on reading Agatha Christie's autobiography at some point, but I wanted to read this first, because it looks like it'd be a quicker, easier read. So I look forward to this. I've been holding back on this, but I do want to get this read this year. And then the final one on my TBR, whether or not I actually get to it is another thing, but this is The Secret Diaries of Hitler's Doctor. And his name is Theodore Morell. And another one who just knew how to sell things. He was very good psychologically at manipulating. Interesting how these, second, third rate, Z-level practitioners of either art or medicine were able to fool the Nazis because they just knew how to play them. So I look forward to reading this, even if it's not this quarter, because I don't know if I'll be able to get to this one. But yeah, that is it for this rather long video. Let me just put all the books back in their sections. And before I turn on the next video, I'm going to rest my jaw for a couple minutes, and then I'll finish up with the last one. So see you in a bit. God bless. Bye.